We're going to explore the most amusing and frightening stories in today's selection. Prepare for an emotional roller coaster as we share outrageous stories and stunning insights. Join us as we dig into the complexities of these interesting topics. Remember to like and subscribe. How did you respond when your ex wants to get back together? Viewer edition. Story 1. Since someone else posted their platonic friend breakup here, I figure I might as well do the same. Dude was literally the only friend I had in middle school because I'm pretty sure middle school and hell are synonyms. Things were pretty great. We were total bros and I liked hanging around him. Then comes high school and I just don't feel the want to hang out with him as much. Looking back, it was a pretty toxic friendship, so maybe I was starting to realize that, but I just distanced myself from him more and more. It all came to a head when we got in a pretty bad argument on my birthday. Can't remember what it was about, just that I basically ended up kicking him out of my house. And I knew that it was probably over. Sure enough, a week passes by without us really saying much to each other, and he's the one to break it off. But his reasoning is weird, saying that we've been friends for too long. And he said, "I crap you not, maybe we can still be acquaintances." To this day, I still have no idea what he meant by that. Anywho, fast forward further into sophomore year, he comes up to me one day with an excited smile on his face and says hello. In my mind, I'm thinking, oh no, I see where this is going, and I want no part of it, so I just walk away without saying a word. He yells at me that I'm a F, as I do, and that pretty much cements it as final. The last thing he ever said to me was when he was talking to someone else, then made a not so passive-aggressive comment about me being an F, homophobic slur, again as I was walking by. I just rolled my eyes and didn't say anything. We didn't talk at all after that. The last I heard of him was when I had heard from some new friends that he had been abusing his ex-girlfriend, which, abusing your girlfriend is already pretty bad, but abusing your ex is just, she's already supposed to be out of your life, just leave her alone already. It also sounded like he had gotten into drugs the last I had seen him. He ended up moving away before high school was finished, so I don't know what happened to him after that. It's been years since then. I genuinely hope he got his crap together and became a better person, but I doubt I'll ever see it. For as much as I like to refer to, high school friendships as, probationary lifetime friendships, because you're still figuring yourself out. Most of your high school friends you're not going to hang on to, and that's fine. A few, though, you might. They make it through the probationary period, but boy, middle school friendships, they're like double secret probation. Delta House. I feel like my references are off the rails. We better just move on. Story 2. I broke up with my very first boyfriend the school year before high school. He was distant, emotionally unavailable at every turn, and would destroy my stuff. For example, throwing my instrument case against the tree at our bus stop and damaging my instrument, bending my phone case, tearing up my music binder, etc. We had talked on and off maybe once a year until we graduated 2020. We were both depressed and upset that we weren't going to actually walk the stage and would only have a virtual graduation. We were respectful towards each other and watched each graduation. After that, he started sending me good morning snaps every morning. I would send some back, and we would talk some days. We were talking to each other more in a week than we were in the last few years combined. We both went, separate dates and would talk to each other about how stupid they were afterwards. I was honestly happy to have my old friend back, completely forgetting how abusive and rude he was while we were dating. He came back into town. He moved away to Missouri freshman year due to his grandfather being sick, and he said he just wanted to hang out. We went to our usual hangout spot, and he proceeded to try and sleep with me in the woods. I said absolutely not. Not after everything he did to me when we were kids. He responded with, he doesn't remember anything before sophomore year. It's all kind of a blur, and he's sorry if it was bad. I then explained, in detail, everything he did in the 2 years of us dating. He said he was sorry, confessed his feelings for me, and that every girl he had dated he compared to me. I responded with, if you don't remember anything from before sophomore year, how do you remember me? He dropped the conversation and took me home. He is blocked on everything due to peeing off thoroughly. Sorry, I couldn't help but shudder a little bit knowing that I'm talking to an adult person who graduated in 2020, which is a full adult lifespan after I graduated. So theoretically, you're young enough that you could have been my kid. Oh God, no. I can't go down that road. I don't blame you. People who try and come back in and do that stuff, it does not ever feel genuine. You absolutely do not have to forgive this person or anything. I think you made the right call. Story 3. During COVID, my ex-girlfriend, then girlfriend, called me asking me to choose between her and my male best friend. To clarify, I'm female. She introduced me to my male best friend 2 years prior to this. She was jealous of the relationship between us, and since I was her girlfriend, she made my life literal hell. She was abusive physically and mentally, and she cheated on me with another female friend of mine. So, for obvious reasons, I chose my male best friend. Then I chewed her out for making me choose. She tried to blame the question on her parents, claiming they made her ask about it. Over the phone, I broke up with her. About a month after I was out of home schooling and into regular school again, this being high school, she got my male friend expelled for supposedly assaulting her via groping her breast. She told me, and when she didn't get a reaction out of me, she went to her dad. Her dad complained to the school, and he got expelled. Multiple times a week, she would try to ask me out again, only for me to reject her. She would cry and threaten to commit self-termination. Honestly, I didn't care. After another month, I got together with my male best friend. We still had each other's numbers and texted each other at the time. We became a long-distance couple over text. Once she figured that out, she went ballistic on me and spammed my phone with texts. That's when I blocked and deleted her phone number and her parents' phone numbers. I hated doing that because we had some amazing role plays. However, I couldn't bear seeing all that crap she sent. She would bully me at school and talk to me nonstop during the transition through classes. Finally, I told her to stop talking to me. She didn't, but it made me feel better to say something about it. The highlight of this story? My boyfriend got his GED and is going to college to become an accountant. Plus, we are still strongly together 2 years and 10 months after this happened. Story 4. Mine actually happened last Friday, LOL. So basically, to sum it up, the guy and I had been in an on and off relationship since 2019. It started great, but over time became emotionally abusive. He would sometimes leave me because his friends said so, or he would just drop out because he was bored or fancied someone else. He would cry to me about his intrusive thoughts, aka his romantic or intimate thoughts about others. He tried fixing the relationship by trying to force me into moving away faster than I was ready for, and then acting depressed when I wasn't extremely willing. The final straw was when he threatened to self-terminate when he left me for his ex, got rejected, and then I refused to take him back. He had threatened stuff like that before, so I rejected him. He went radio silent, refusing to answer my texts or calls or anything, leading me to believe he actually did it. So, racked with guilt and shock because I thought I caused that, I tried to off myself with pills. The jerk finally answered when I texted him goodbye and said, "See you soon." I nearly lost my life because of him, so of course I left. This was September 9th, 2022. So, fast forward to last Friday, January 13th, 2023, I got a random message from one of his friends saying he wanted to talk. Some of his friends are super nice, and this was one of them, so I answered out of pity. I agreed to talk with him, unblocked him, and it started all over again. The emotional manipulation and stuff, saying he missed me and basically ruined his life over me, etc. To be fair, he did start some stuff, drinking a lot or smoking and taking drugs, etc., but still, putting the blame on me was uncalled for. He tried asking for me back even knowing I'm in a 2-month relationship now. I rejected him, and the contact lasted all of 2 days before I blocked him again. Never gonna look back this time. I'm happy now. Wedding workers. What wedding was so bad that you knew they would divorce? Viewer edition. Story 1. Here's a nice story of an old college friend of mine whose wedding is attended last year. I attended last year. It's the end of September. We've already gone through the ceremony and are at the reception. The bride and groom looked stunning. Unintentional side note, because I love gushing about this, they had a wonderful wedding with slight Star Wars / Legend of Zelda themes powdered here and there with handmade resin coasters, some of which their initials of their first name, others with either the Triforce or the Rebellion symbols on them. Bride is a big fan of Star Wars and groom loves the Legend of Zelda franchise. Also, each member of the wedding party, from bridesmaids and groomsmen to ring bearer and flower girl, had a little Star Wars Lego character tied to bouquets or boutonnieres. It was awesome. Sorry, I loved how my friend and her hubby flaunted their nerdiness without going overboard and still looking classy. Now back to the story. We're halfway through the reception, meals were served, speeches were made, and mother of the groom, Mog groom, and fob bride dances were danced. Both were absolutely sweet, and I could tell mother of the groom and father of the bride were so proud. It's cake cutting time. The bride and groom are at the cake table, and I'm trying my best to get a snapshot of them cutting the cake. And then it happens. Some dude, I think it was a groomsman, yells from behind them, "Shove the cake into her face!" I winced at that because I listened to Bridezilla or Marriage Isn't Gonna Last Long, even to put me to sleep. Shoving cake into a bride or groom's face was a sign of a red flag. I was really hoping he was joking. Gosh darn, hubby, who is a very, very, very smart dude, shouted in unison with his wife the word no. I had a mental fist bump in the air at his response. I've seen videos of grooms smashing cake into the bride's face, even vice versa. Why do people think it's funny destroying probably an hour's worth of makeup or a very nice rented tux with frosting? And deep down, cake smashing your significant other when they say no shows how much you respect them. Very proud of the groom for shutting that down, even if it was a joke. Long story short, dude is egging the groom to cake smash, groom says hell no, and right now is happily past the 6-month mark of being married to my friend. To my friend and her hubby, I'm wishing you two a long and happy marriage. Yeah, I actually think the cake smashing in the face, it can be cute and funny. Like, I've seen folks do it, and it's a really fun, charming moment, especially getting it caught on camera, if they're both down for it. Like, that should maybe even be discussed ahead of time, because yeah, some brides spend a long time getting like their makeup and hair done right and everything, and they want to like keep the dress in good condition and stuff. And if you're not careful with that, you can ruin it. And some of these weddings are expensive. Makeup costs a lot, and it's gonna cost you a lot more if you ruin it.
Story 2. Concerning the 26-minute 35-second mark of the original video, I have a story that backs up this theory. So my aunt, not related, but one of my dad's old coworkers, had an anime-themed wedding. Lots of Sailor Moon because I think that was her favorite one. She likes Kirby and Pokemon as well, but you can only go so far with those. My dad told me to help shoot some photos, but one woman, I don't know who, but I assume was just a cranky wedding planner, wouldn't even let me into the bride's room while they were getting ready. I did get to take pictures of the groom and his friends kind of goofing off, so that was relaxing for me. I've gotten better, but I can be very nervous and quiet when meeting people for the first time. Getting a "no, we already have pictures" and a door almost to the face stressed me out a bit, especially since my dad had specifically told me to get pictures of them preparing. A third to half the guests were dressed as anime characters, me included. I was a bit scared at first, since when we arrived, most of the people were dressed like you typically see at a wedding, but some people did show up as anime characters, and my aunt seemed extremely happy to see anyone even referencing anime. We've got a book of their wedding photos sitting on the mantle, the cover being her and her husband dressed as Tuxedo Mask, sharing their first kiss as a married couple. We usually get together for Pokemon Go events, but they always look really happy together, whether at their home, ours, or out and about. I've got a really good feeling about them.
Hey folks, quick content warning for this next story. It does have some references and whatnot to self-termination, and so if you are uncomfortable with that, you may want to skip to the time code on screen to avoid this story.
Story 3. Concerning Story 7 and 22 from the original video, remind me of a girl I knew in college who couldn't make any relationship when she was at work. If you ever asked her why she broke up with any of her boyfriends, she would always say that they were jerks to her or they tried to R her. If you asked her exes, on the other hand, they would say that she mentally and sometimes physically abused them over the smallest things. I think her longest was about a month. One day, I got one of those parents of bride and parents of groom inviting you to the wedding of bride and groom letters and saw her name on the letter. This is like 7 or 8 years out of college. I also knew the groom as my high school science partner. No way he was going to recognize me. Out of curiosity, I went. I walked inside of the church where everyone except the kids had a look on their faces like they were being held hostage instead of at a wedding. The ceremony began, and as the bride walked down the aisle, the groom had a face like Luigi in the beta game overscreen from Luigi's Mansion, all gloomy and depressed. At the reception, the groom told his best man that he would be going back to the hotel to get some more food. The manager of the hotel called the groom's parents shortly after and said he had committed self-termination by tying a chain link to both himself and a cement block, went to the hotel pool, and drowned himself. His funeral was 2 weeks later. While I was there, I saw the bride, clearly fake crying, clenched my fist, walked up to her and socked her in the face while yelling, "You know what you did, you rotten W," as people held back. I somehow wasn't charged, but the bride was charged with domestic abuse and enforced self-termination. The domestic abuse I knew without a shadow of a doubt, but I would have never guessed enforced self-termination. She was sentenced to 11 years. Hey folks, quick content warning. Unfortunately, this story does have mention to child abuse and even R. And so if you are uncomfortable with that, you might want to skip to the times code on screen to pass this story up. Story 4. I photographed a wedding where I thought that the groom was looking at all of the younger women like they were meat in a butcher shop. I thought that there was no way the marriage would last. I was right. 6 months later, I read an article in the newspaper about the groom being arrested for drugging and brutally R-ing the bride's 12-year-old daughter one night while the bride was at work. The bride was a nurse working nights in a hospital emergency room. Imagine the wife's shock when the ambulance brought her daughter into the hospital for treatment. The girl needed 2 surgeries to save her life, and as a result of her injuries, she will never be able to have children of her own. The groom is now serving life plus 65 years in prison, and he has already been transferred to another prison twice because the other inmates have almost beaten him to death. He's been placed in solitary confinement in his current prison just to keep the other inmates from ending him. Story 5. Obligatory not in the industry, but I do have a story that would fit in here. A friend of ours, let's call her A, suddenly got a "I must get married and have a baby because everyone around me is and I feel left out" thought in her head that wouldn't leave. So she married the first guy that was interested in her. His all-time crush, let's call her B, was at the wedding as a bridesmaid, and when she walked down the aisle during rehearsal, his eyes were all over B, visibly checking her out. When his fiancée walked down, his eyes barely followed her. Many people noticed and hoped that he wouldn't make that mistake the next day, and hopefully his best man would smack him for it. Sure enough, the big day comes and his eyes are undressing B. His wife walks down the aisle, and I think he looked at the dad more than A. A kid later, and I think that was still her last big day, and his was sometime before the wedding. Folks, I know you start to get worried that you're oh, I'm in my 20s, 30s, and I haven't gotten married, and that feels, like people are judging me, and now I want to get married. That should not be the goal. Just getting married shouldn't be your goal because it can kind of skew your perspective a little bit. Not healthy. You should just want to be able to find someone to share your life with, and only pursue marriage if you're truly happy with that person, because trying to force it and everything, you end up with stories like this. Story 6. I got one. My younger brother and his ex-girlfriend broke up after about 2 years of being together. A few months later, she got engaged to another guy, and a few months after that, she's married. Her reason for marrying him was simple, that she wanted to be married, not necessarily to the guy she married. She was 19 at the time, would still contact my brother claiming to still love him, and came to work with me in our town for a few weeks before the wedding like she was trying to get him to do something or something. And then, over the summer, she calls my brother and goes on about how she was regretting her choices. Well, no crap, girl, you're 19. Super weird and kinda red flaggy. Story 7. Somewhat related to Story 12 from the original video. On the day of my younger sister's wedding, we, the bridesmaid family, without the bride being there, placed bets on how long the marriage will last. I don't remember what the bets are since we really didn't set up an actual pot, but my sister has been married to her husband since 2014 with 3 kids, and there are signs of a failing marriage. He would put himself before my sister and their kids, like spending money on attending his 50th rock concert that year over spending a penny for his daughter's dance classes, or not going to work and getting paid for several days because of an injury, and not see an actual doctor because he could just sleep it off. My mom once said my sister is just putting up with him just for the kids' sake. What's your scariest hotel story? Viewer edition.
Story 1. So this didn't happen to me necessarily, but I was there for it. This was back in 2017. I had just gotten a new job at a brand new hotel as a night audit, basically a front desk associate who runs all the numbers for the hotel overnight. I did that. It's usually a pretty quiet job, and I didn't normally see anyone until about 6 to 7 a.m. when guests were checking out early. This night, I was just effing around, making myself a white chocolate mocha, and suddenly this middle-aged dude walks in from off the street. I get excited because, again, I usually don't see people, and I give him a warm welcome and ask him if he could use a room for the night. He says he needs a room, and I'm just stoked to finally have a guest staying with us. So I ask his name for a valid form of ID and a valid credit card for incidentals, like if you want to charge snacks to your room or you steal pillows or something. Dude says, I want to pay cash for the room. And I tell him that's totally fine. When he checks out, he's more than welcome to pay cash, but we do need a card on file for incidentals per policy. He gets a little argumentative, I assumed because most middle-aged men get sussy when it comes to their card info, but he relents and gives me what I require to book him a room. I give him his key card and wish him a good night, and when he leaves the lobby, I'm back to rolling my rolly chair across the lobby as far as I can. An hour and a half later, 2 police officers show up. Naturally, I treat them like any guest, warmly welcome them, ask them if I can get them a room, etc., and they ask me if Mr. Middle-Aged Man checked into the hotel. At the front desk, legally, I'm not allowed to disclose that information on a normal basis, but they flashed their badges, and I told them that yes, Mr. Middle-Aged was checked into our hotel. They told me to call my manager as Mr. Middle-Aged was to be put under arrest, and I was just like, ugh, as I called my manager, who was at first peeved that I called him at 3 a.m., but as soon as I told him the cops were here to arrest a guest, he told me 10 minutes, hung up on me, and drove to the hotel to meet us. He has his master key with him as he escorts the cops to the room that Mr. Middle-Aged is in. I heard some door kicking and then a very loud pop, and I only found out secondhand what happened. Mr. Middle-Aged was wanted for the crime of beating his wife with lethal intent with a weapon, unsure what the weapon was to this day. And he thought he had killed her, but she was still alive and had their Google Home call the cops when he left. When he got to the hotel room, he deadbolted the door and apparently just sat in the room until the cops showed up, to which he pulled out a gun and put it in his mouth. Luckily, this guy was a dumb butt and ended up shooting through his jaw and ear instead of blowing his brains out, so they were able to take him to the hospital, stabilize him, and arrest him. Thank God I got the card number because we had to charge that credit card for the blood splatter cleanup, fixing the window because the bullet shot through his jaw, ear, and the window, and of course, repainting the room. I really hope the wife is okay, but that guy can seriously go to hell. As a former night auditor myself, you have definitely bested my creepiest hotel auditor story because holy crap, that's very intense. The most that I had is I had a guest who, he was already checked in when I got there, I think just before I arrived for my shift, and he was, calling up to the front desk a few times, just asking for strange questions. I don't remember what. This was literally over 20 years ago. But yeah, just asking some kind of weird questions, and I was just like, oh yeah, no, oh no, the bar isn't open. It's 2 in the morning, stuff like that. And then I eventually get a call that's like, oh hey, this is the police. Do you have such and such a guest staying? And I was like, not supposed to reveal the information. Could I get badge number, this and that, And then I was like, yeah, he is staying. Oh, can you tell us what room he's in? I can, why?
He has been calling around to people, telling them how he's going to cut his penis off. And I was like, oh my God, he's in this room. Please stop him. And they did. Happy ending?
Story 2. I went to a hotel, sorted out my clothes for the next day, had a shower, got changed, then walked about 100 meters to have a few drinks at the pub. Was there for only 1.5 hours, then walked back to my room and closed the door, then sat on my bed watching TV, with that being the only light in the room. Suddenly, I heard panting, then saw a dog walking from where the door was. It was a great-looking, solid English Staffordshire Bull Terrier and friendly as hell. So I leaned over to give him a pat while wondering how he got in my room. As I got close to his head, he simply disappeared in front of me. As I've had experience with the paranormal, this didn't really faze me. When we left the next morning, I casually mentioned about the dog. Turns out that his owner was sleeping in that room one day and had a heart attack, and that the dog stayed outside that room till it died. All this happened 23 years ago. Seems like the dog is still entering the room to check on people and never caused any problems. Except for one guy that apparently didn't like dogs and went to literally kick him out of the room. His leg went through the dog, then he broke a toe when his foot hit the wall instead. Story 3. Always listen to locals if they tell you an area isn't safe. I live in Cape Town now, but grew up in Pretoria, South Africa, for those who don't know. Once when I was younger and living in Pretoria, I came across this elderly German couple walking around Sunnyside just after sunset, a not very safe area. If you know, you know. They were wearing their travel backpacks and heading to a candy vendor on the street. Those people often work in regards to the illicit substance trade and with other unsavory syndicate activities, especially if they're posted in a low pedestrian trafficked area. I was luckily on the right side of the road and stopped in front of them, asked them where they were going, and gave them a lift. Apparently other locals told them to not walk around there, but they didn't listen. Nearly lost it, but politely advised them to listen to locals about bad areas, otherwise they might end up victims of a mugging or just disappearing. I hope they're doing okay, though, and wizened up in their travels. Story 4. I traveled around Eastern North America for 3 weeks, with most of my nights spent at friends' places since they were kind enough to host me, but I did have to stay at a hotel on 3 separate occasions. The weirdest experience was probably at a hotel in the Canadian Maritimes, where I stayed at a massive hotel that had about 3 large convention spaces between the 3 floors and a small inner grass courtyard. The rooms were all along the perimeter, and my room was functionally on the opposite side of the hotel from the front desk and down to the floor. I also checked in on a Sunday for 2 nights in December, so minus the random events planned in the different spaces, the hotel was rather dead. I don't think I had anyone else booked on my floor, so other than the mid-morning knock on the door from housekeeping asking if I needed new towels, I didn't really interact with anyone. The room was also quite dated, and because I was on the ground floor, I had a massive glass sliding door that could be opened to the previously mentioned inner courtyard, which I think I triple-checked that the door was shut, and I had to adjust the coffee table in the room so that the curtain would completely cover the glass. At least I had the hot tub to myself.
I don't know why, but that does sound creepy. Like, you would think it'd be nice. It's like quiet hotel, it's the winter, ground floor, but no, I don't want it to be really quiet in the hotel and for me to also have a big glass patio door that's just facing out into the desolate cold. Like, that just feels like something's gonna happen. I mean, if I lived in a horror movie, which, I don't know, maybe I do.
Story 5. As a former Wingate Pharmacy School dropout, I can definitively say that many anti-malarial drugs can do way more than just cause strange dreams. Some are known for causing outright hallucinations, sometimes bad enough to affect a person's ability to function. Plus, hallucinations can easily be influenced by others. These are sometimes called shared hallucinations/delusions. Basically, someone else says or does something to suggest or prime a hallucination in another person, or both parties shared an origin experience earlier, like an odd woman on the street, and took subconscious note of her, so they both experienced hallucinations involving an odd woman. Story 6.
As a person who lives in Nicaragua, if you ever come here, run while you still can. The spiders are fast and they smell fear and have a lust for blood. One of the more common ones I come across is called the Araña pica caballos, which roughly translates to horse stinging spider. By the name, you already know those mother effers are no good to mess around with. Last time I saw one, it was at the side of my bed, and craphead was around 20 centimeters long. You know, I ran out squealing, and then I came back and got a big butt Raid bottle and emptied it on the effer. Scorpions are also a problem, but not as common as the big eat crap and die spiders, although they are strangely attracted to toilets. I swear around half of my scorpion encounters have been in public toilets. Food's cheap, though. God damn it! So the original video, there was a story about these big awful spiders in Nicaragua and everything, and yep, good. So glad to have the confirmation about all these big, just awful spiders. 20 centimeters, it's so big, it's so many. Oh, I'm sorry, Nicaragua. I'm just sorry. Story 7. Not a hotel, but a cabin my family stayed in once when I was about 13. The whole time we stayed there, the dog kept throwing up and peeing inside the cabin. He was an adult and fully potty trained by this point, and he'd never acted like that anywhere else before or since. At first we thought, okay, maybe something in here smells weird to him. Then my sister took a shower, and when she got out, she saw "Welcome to Stabbin' Cabins Number 1" written in the fog on the mirror. Other weird little moments happened while we were staying there, but those two were the main things. How did the popular kid's life fall apart? Viewer edition. Story 1. I was the popular kid. I had a minor stroke when I was 16 that set off a cascading effect that effed up pretty much every aspect of my life for years. Physically, I was fine for the most part, but mentally I took a hit. I went from having a 160 plus IQ to struggling to retain sentences I just read. I had difficulty speaking for a while and still slur a little bit even now, and became absent-minded and had trouble with comprehension for a few years. This tanked my grades, destroyed my social life, and derailed my life plans. My relationship with my girlfriend fell apart. I was depressed all the time and sleeping all day. I isolated myself from everyone else because I didn't want their pity or their help, and began self-medicating with anything that could make me feel alive again. The really frustrating thing about it was being perceived as damaged or mentally disabled, when in reality I was still me. I still had full cognizance, I just didn't have all my faculties about me. It took years of speech therapy and mental exercises to get back to where I was before, but now I'm over my speech impairment and foggy mind. I lost a decade of my life to a freak medical occurrence, and now I'm back and I'm peed off and ready to grab the world by the throat. This isn't a sad story about perseverance with a happy ending. This is my villain origin story. Far be it from me to dissuade anyone from their villain origin story. You know what? You do what you gotta do, but also, huge props to you for, sticking with it and getting your life back on track. I know it's not possible for everyone. There are all kinds of freak medical occurrences that are going to be all sorts of hurdles in your life, but hey, you're sticking with it, and eventually, I know that you're going to find the nemesis of your dreams. Story 2. So, there was this kid in my junior high school who was one of those tough guy types. He'd walk around with this big group and insult and intimidate others all the time. Staff had suspended him multiple times, but he just kept doing it. One day during lunch, he started messing with me, as he usually did. He knew I was autistic and thought it was funny, calling me a whole lot of insults and slurs, as he did with a lot of people, and I put up with it. Honestly, I was fine with him messing with me. I could take it. But one day, he had started messing with my best friend and my girlfriend at the time. That I wouldn't put up with. I stood up, turned around, he was behind me at another table, and punched him in the middle of his back. He got up and pushed me back, then put both his hands in front of him when I started towards him to retaliate, saying, Okay, I don't want to fight you. He yelled, I stopped, and then walked out of the cafeteria and the school and walked home. I was quite done with being at school. A few days later, I got an out-of-school suspension, and he got the same. He never bothered me or my friends again, lost his, and then dropped out at the start of high school. Haven't seen him since. Hope you're well, Austin, and sorry for publicly humiliating you. I mean, while I'm not going to condone, violence unless it is necessary for defending yourself, you know what? He still learned a lesson, and I'm with you. I hope that Austin is doing well and has maybe kind of learned not to mess around with people like that. There's no positive to that in the long run. So, yeah, I can't blame you for doing what you did.
Story 3. A girl that I worked with, aged 19, was absolutely stunningly beautiful. She had most of the male staff wrapped around her finger. I busted my butt working there, while she simply got everyone else to do her work via manipulation. I also had to pay for training, which she got for free. She slept with many of the single male staff members, often behind each of their backs, and also had at least one affair with a married staff member while being engaged herself. She then got pregnant with twins, her fiancé left her, and she pretended on social media that this was her life plan all along. She showed pictures of her beautiful house, completely white color scheme, and all I could think of was how impractical that would be with babies and toddlers, lol. After the babies got here, all her social media was deleted, and I haven't seen her since. I don't even know if that was even her house, ha ha ha.
I'm not going to criticize anybody for, choosing their dream to be having children and getting off of social media. I'm not saying that she did it for the right reasons or that she's even remotely happy, but I am saying someone could do that and be very happy, possibly happier than most of us.
Story 4. Knew a kid in high school who was popular for boxing and would make claims that his uncle was in the cartel and was a gangster and post himself smoking weed on Insta. Being a boxer, he would pick on kids smaller than him, using them to boost his ego, and even tried bullying me, but left me alone because I knew the basics and would stay out of range. Fast forward, he's hanging out with a friend playing around with a handgun because there are gangsters, and one accidental discharge later, he dies before anyone reaches the scene. I don't know, maybe something's wrong with me, but it would bug me when people tried to pretend that he was some kind of saint. When I found out, I felt nothing. P.S. Sorry for bad grammar. Story 5. Had one popular kid in school that wasn't rich, but had more money than most. Parents bought him a fancy sports car so he could stop taking the school bus like a poor person. He decided to show off his ride after school by doing donuts in the school parking lot. Next day, he entered class in a rage, demanding to know who called the police on him because he got a ticket for doing donuts in said parking lot. I was the weird kid in class because autism wasn't widely known in the late 90s, early 2000s, so he instantly assumed it was me. I just said, "You are aware that the building directly across the street from us is the local police station, right?" He paused for a moment while the whole room went dead silent while staring at him. He said, "Is it? How long?" I just said, "It's been there since before my dad went to this school, so some 50 years?" He was mocked for his stupidity for the remainder of high school. Story 6. Old friend's cousin was very popular. Her sister was too. Her sister was extremely kind to everyone she knew and was the only friend to this person who was bullied a lot. Her brother was a bit mean, but also very nice at times. There was a disaster in the town, small country town, and many people lost their lives, including his sister, also his mother, friends, boyfriend, and some other family. And he was disowned by his father for being gay after that disaster. Everyone at his school blamed him for the disaster as a teen gang had been part of it, and they believed him to be part of the gang. He wasn't. Anyway, now he's quite rich and famous in the city he lives in, so he got his life back, but those years after the attack were some of the hardest he's admitted.
What awful stuff for that person to have to go through, like losing most of their family and then the one immediate family member left, their dad, disowns them for being gay, which, hey, any parent, if you do that, you're a bad parent. You're just a bad parent and a bad person. So screw you. Love your kids unconditionally. But I am glad that that person's life turned around. They, stuck with things and now they're rich and doing well. Like, good for them. I'm sure it doesn't quite mend all the heartbreak they went through, but I'm sure it helps. Story 7. Kind of like story number 25 in the original video, I had a friend in 4th or 5th grade who had a crush on a popular girl. Me being one of the outcasts, he said he didn't want to be friends anymore. I was confused and in shock. He said something along the lines of, "I can't get a girlfriend if I hang out with someone like you." Next year in middle school, he just looked sad. Asked him what was up, and he said most of his friends had ditched him after he struck out with this girl. His new friends constantly made fun of him for it. He apologized and asked if we wanted to be friends. I said, "I can't get a girlfriend if I look like you," making my voice sound as close to his as I could. Karma's a bee, Ryan. Story 8. I used to be known around my school and was pretty well liked, I think, by most. Well, after graduating, I moved states and tried to keep in contact with everyone as much as possible. I realized my friends were actually pretty horrible people because I would drive 4 hours to see them, pay for our activities, and drive another 4 hours home since I could never crash at their place. The last straw was when I paid for a trip to the beach and only asked them to cover their own food, and after a month of planning, they waited until the day before to rain check me, and I ended up going alone. I only have one friend who I am happy with now. Story 9. His life didn't fall apart until a decade later, but everyone still remembered and liked him up to this point because he was that popular. He was a really nice guy. One of my friends had a crush on him, and many people from high school still talked to or about him a decade after graduation. They found CP on his laptop, like a lot of it. I think it was the biggest CP case in my city's recent history. Everyone was shocked and horrified when they found out. I found out because everyone who went to school with him was talking about it. The guy we all still talked about because he was just that cool, funny, and a nice guy turned out to be the biggest monster in the city. What says poor, but pretending to be rich? Viewer edition. Story 1. When I worked at an upscale restaurant, we had a party of over 20 people who, from what I was told, came in every year around the same time of the year for a family get-together. They had a contract with a manager a few managers back that essentially made it so they'd pay around $100 for all alcohol they consume with the promise that they wouldn't drink much. Which the current manager told me that I said, "This is Wisconsin. You need to tell them that since you're not the manager that made that contract, it's void. You're gonna lose a crap ton of money tonight." I was told that I wasn't even old enough to drink, so I didn't know what I was talking about. And anyway, I could only get the beers off tap and certain low-priced wines. I had to clear probably close to 100 beer glasses off the table throughout the night. Not as many wine glasses because they'd fill from the bottle. I ended up having to help the manager and server figure out how much they lost because neither could do the math. I weep for the fact that I worked for someone who couldn't do basic math. I'm not even good at math, but I could do those calculations without a calculator and faster than them. We lost over $250 to $300 in alcohol. On top of that, they made a set menu to keep the costs down, but half the stuff they wanted, we didn't even serve anymore or never served in the first place. The chef had to hand make mango sorbet for them and was told they'd eat a lot more than they did, so the chef gave me a crap ton of sorbet. By the end of the night, that party was struggling to hold each other up and needed help getting up the stairs to leave. When I raised concerns to the manager that we shouldn't be letting them drive and that we could get in trouble for not cutting them off, I was told once again that I didn't know what I was talking about. Then I got yelled at for not having the table fully cleared in 5 minutes and needing the other busser to help as well as a couple servers. The dishwasher was mad because he thought he had an easy night and was surprised to see the dishes the manager wouldn't let us take from the table while they were still there. Manager had that was mango sorbet all over the white tablecloths, and that she'd have to pay all those who stayed to clean up overtime. Half the time she didn't even stick around until closing or sat in the office or at the bar on her phone. Okay, as someone from a northern Midwest state, Minnesota, and who has spent quite a bit of time in Wisconsin, Never sign a contract that says that people from that area can drink as much as they want for $100. I don't care if it's 2 people. Don't sign that contract. That's a bad deal. They are going to drink you under the table. Oh, no. And mango sorbet. I mean, delicious, but why? What is this contract? Get out of it. Story 2. I am 100% with you about the cars. I remember when our Accord got stolen. We got it back, but it had gotten the drive and dump treatment and stank, and none of us was comfortable just going back to using it. Fortunately, we'd gotten a good 12 years out of it, so we traded it in on a new Toyota Camry. And man, here I'm thinking I'm pretty privileged. I can afford to trade in a car that now gives me the creeps and might just get stolen again tomorrow, and buy new. So, I roll up to drop my daughter off for a campout, and the Girl Scout troop leader's husband toddles over to make conversation about the new car, but he seems rather at a loss, and after a pause he says, "I heard that a Lexus is really just a Camry underneath with a Lexus shell." Now, I have no idea at the time what he's even talking about. He might as well have said, "All tortoises are turtles, but not all turtles are tortoises." So I just kind of mumble, "Oh, huh?" It's only later that I work out that this clueless Yorba Linda boomer clearly thinks my shiny new car is so embarrassing that not only can he not find a single ordinary sensible human comment to make about the situation, but that in fact he thinks this shame is so obvious that I will appreciate being reassured that it isn't that bad. No. I'm really driving a Lexus. Apparently Lexus is expensive or something? They don't look expensive. They look like grandma cars. Weirdly, there was no sneer in his statement, no patronizing tone. He showed no sign of trying to be deliberately rude, but in his mind, this was such an awkward situation. This poor lady could only afford an economy sedan. Ye gods! But whatever. I got a new car that I drove for 13 years and that was still running when I decided I needed something with a higher driver's seat. And I could afford to buy a Hyundai base model crossover. And I still feel pretty privileged. I got a blue one and put a star sticker on it. Yeah, I will never understand needing a car as a status symbol. I want a car that is safe, that's efficient, and that will work as much as possible without having problems. The fewer times I need to take it in, the better. Otherwise, no, I don't want a big fancy car, and, you know, I'm fine with the size of my genitals, so,
Story 3. When I was in about 3rd grade or so, there was this girl in my class who brought in a seashell for show and tell and explained about how it was from the restaurant her family ate at because they ate, I think she said snails or something like that, and they came in the shells. We were all focused on the ew, gross factor because, you know, we were at that age. I don't think there was a single person in the room other than the girl telling the story and possibly the teacher who was aware that such things would mainly be served at expensive restaurants. I mean, we were at the age where McDonald's is considered a great restaurant, and if somebody's parents work there, it's glamorous and everyone is envious. A couple of weeks later, the girl broke down in tears and apologized, at which point we all found out she was lying about the restaurant because she wanted us to think her family was wealthy, and apparently she thought the eating snails story would convince us of that? Super weird. The shell was just one that she found at a beach somewhere. She could have told us that too, honestly, and I think most of us would have been more impressed because when you live in Ohio, the beach is at least 2 days' drive away, whereas there are restaurants everywhere. I don't think I would have remembered the eating snails story long term if it hadn't been followed by the teary confession. That stuck with me because it was the first time I ever heard of anyone wanting people to think their family is wealthier than is actually the case. Story 4. My family is middle class. When my brother was 13 to 15, he was obsessed with looking wealthier than he was. We lived in a small town and hardly anybody was wealthy per se. However, some of his friends were slightly better off than our family and a bit spoiled, so he started putting on airs. He would only wear name brand clothing with the logo prominently displayed and would throw a fit if it wasn't.
He would only wear Oakley sunglasses, which had to be mailed back to the manufacturer to be repaired or replaced whenever something happened to them, which happened 4 times a year because he kept sitting on them and dropping them. He refused to invite his friends back to our house because it wasn't nice enough, made our parents drop him off at the end of the block so people didn't see their cars, and wouldn't let his friends meet the family. He constantly ridiculed my working-class boyfriend who worked full-time and attended college on his own dime. Thankfully, he grew out of it when he got older, but until then, he was completely insufferable. I've known so many kids in that age range when I've gone to high school, seeing other kids grow up as I've gotten older. They get in that age where they think it's so important that they have all this name brand stuff. And I was never that kid. I never cared. And I mean, obviously. Story 5. My father was an interior designer for really rich people that enjoyed their anonymity. They tend to have old mansions that aren't very large but well maintained and beautifully decorated, thanks to my dad. They didn't buy designer clothes for every day, but had extensive wardrobes of high couture and not to trash bag kind, but the more vintage couture for events. The wannabe rich tend to dress to the nines every day just to make a statement, and if you ever visit Monaco for an example, you spot almost immediately who is new money, Gucci and Louis Vuitton everything, it's tacky as F, and you probably can't tell between the locals, whom are not well off at all, and the rich. From my experience, the wannabe rich look down on you for not having money while the real ones just mind their own business. Story 6. I live in an area where the median household income is only $31,000. Someone once told me that whenever they see designer purses, they assume it's fake because no one in town can afford the real thing. I laughed and agreed somewhat, but I know there's such a thing as buy now, pay later, so it's possible those items are real, but they're making payments on them. Also, I think people really need to understand the difference between new money and old money. Rich people absolutely do wear loud, flashy clothes and jewelry, flash their money, wear logos on clothes, and ask, "Do you know who I am?" But that's the new money crowd. The first generation, self-made crowd, and especially athletes and entertainers. The quiet luxury crowd is usually old money. They've been rich for generations, and having/spending money doesn't give the adrenaline rush or ego boost that it does for people who used to be poor. Secrets that you're taking to the grave, viewer edition. Hey folks, content warning for this whole video. A number of these stories deal with subject matter relating to S assault or R, child abuse and molestation, and yeah, just some rough stories. So if you're sensitive to that, I just want you to be prepared, or you may even just want to skip this video. Story 1. I wish I saw this on Reddit so I could submit my story, but I'll just share it on here, I guess. I got good news for you. I was in 4th grade, I believe, and some guy said Roblox is better than Minecraft, and Minecraft sucks. Keep in mind, this was when Minecraft was in its early days, 2012 to 2013. I think Minecraft is still a work in progress. Soon it'll be a big game, I'm sure, I say. Him, being the little chump he was, he says, "Bro, shut up. Roblox is the best game ever." This is where I snap at this little brat who completely disregards my statement, and I say snarkily, "Minecraft is better than Roblox, and Roblox sucks penis." And I added the penis part to make the insult hurt more. A girl tattled on me, and I got a note sent to my parents. However, I had a plan forming in my head. I told my parents the story, except with small changes to make the Roblox kid look worse than he actually was, and that he was the one who said penis first, and I just returned the same insult. My parents believe me, and they got really mad at the kid. So mad to the point where they decided to go up to the school and shed some light on the situation. Turns out it worked, and the Roblox kid ended up getting a worse punishment than I did. That was the moment where I found out I was scarily good at lying and deceiving. I never really used this talent going forward because I decided if my parents found out I lied once, it would be like they couldn't trust me with anything anymore. I mean, I don't know, that was 10 years ago now, and 4th grade, that makes you probably an adult now. I think you could come clean to that. I don't think you got to take that one to your grave, you know? It's not great to lie about stuff like that, but yeah, no, I think you're fine. Story 2. That a close relative who I still have a very loving relationship with has repeatedly molested me at a very young age. They think I was too young to remember. For years, and especially recently, they kept asking me these really odd, probing questions to get me to talk about it, but I always pretend I have no idea what they're getting at. I've been watching them like a hawk around children, but they don't really have any access to kids, and they clearly turned down the very few chances they might have gotten. This is the only part I was ever concerned about, and let's just say I'm not concerned anymore. Personally, the act never stood out as anything significant to me until I learned what that was. Even then, the realization of what they did came very gradually. I can't bring myself to hate them. They're near and dear to me. They've given me so much and even saved my life. They've gone the extra mile for me, believed in me, made my life genuinely great, and they're just the sweetest person to everyone. I can't bring myself to talk about it with them. I most definitely couldn't tell anyone else, and it's not like people would believe me if I did. This is the first time I spoke of this. So I'm glad that it hasn't had a traumatic impact on you. However, just because you don't see them doing this to any other children doesn't mean they aren't. It may just mean that they're very good at covering it up because they put forward that facade. You know, people see them as this wonderful, sweet person who would never do that. And it worked well enough that no one realized this person did it to you. So maybe you don't know that someone's doing it that they're doing it to someone else. I'm not saying that's for sure what's happening, but folks, these kind of things should be reported. These people have a problem and they can hurt others. They can traumatize children or worse. It's not okay. You do whatever you think is right, but I think that it should be reported personally.
Story 3. Back around high school is where my alcoholism started. My parents locked their beer and wine in the garage since my brothers would always get into it and drink literally all of it. One morning, I snuck into my mom's room while she was sleeping and went and copied the key. I drank my butt off for like 2 years straight. And they definitely did notice booze missing from time to time. They always blamed it on my oldest brother, which I found hilarious because he's a grade A a-hole. He actually got arrested several times because they would confront him about it, and he had bad anger issues, so it'd turn into a shouting match. Yeah, I'm probably going to hell for that, but man, was it funny. Honestly, the guy needed to be in jail for a bit. He was about 30 years old at the time and hadn't worked a job in years, living in my parents' basement. Jail helped him out quite a bit and gave him something to think about. Story 4. I felt for that poor guy constantly getting set up with people by his mom. I'm bi, and that sort of thing still makes me uncomfortable when my parents go trying to set me up with their friends' kids. Never mind that most of those kids I've known since we were little, and I have no interest in boning someone I've played with since a pool party that happened when we were 2 years old. Being friends with your partner is good. Being that close feels icky to me. I mean, come on, Mom. Malia is pretty much my sister. I have zero interest in her, and I'm 99% sure she has zero interest in me. You'd have more luck getting me to bone my best friend. At least she wasn't there for every single time I ever embarrassed myself as a child. Sometimes, well-meaning parents are trigger-happy for grandkids and have no respect for the parents of the future grandkids. Story 5. Think I'd win, but not taken to my grave but my dad's. He was no BSer and told my brother and I this story and swore us never to tell. Dan ran a hospital lab, and one day the head maintenance came to complain about his staff. When cleaning up around the biohaz incinerator, he found a human limb in a trash bag, not sure if he said an arm or leg. Since the lab was the last stop for such things, he was ticked and told Dad needed to let his staff know to treat biohaz more carefully. Dad stopped him and he said he did not remember any such amputations recently. Guy went pale. Dad checked the hospital records and found no corresponding procedure for the prior 3 years. He called the head of maintenance back to a closed-door meeting where they agreed to keep the secret, since the evidence had been incinerated and the head of maintenance would lose his job if it came out. Dad's been gone for over a decade, so he did keep the secret except to my brother and I. Story 6. When I was like 10, I think, I was taking my lunch to school. My dad had these protein packs he takes to work, and I was rushing to get my things together. I grabbed one, not realizing it was the last one.
That night, I got yelled at because of it. I lied and said I didn't take it. I was in tears. It got to the point my dad went into my room to check if I had taken it, but I had thrown the trash away in the cafeteria. They didn't give me a punishment, and I think they bought the lie. I'm still scared to take the last of some foods because of it. My old friends say it's stupid to be scared about it, but I was a kid that was being yelled at. It wasn't like my parents hadn't taken the last of my food or drinks. They still do to this day. My BFF says it's stupid they yelled at me for it, especially since the protein pack was all I ate that day since I'd been struggling with eating enough. Okay, yeah, I gotta agree with your friends that it's awful that your parents would yell at you for something like that. You should not feel at all bad about that. Like, seriously, especially if they're like taking your snacks and food and stuff. You needed to be fed. You had trouble eating. Like, there should be no anger from your parents about this. Like, maybe they should be like, hey, I was saving that for my workout, but let's figure out a way to make sure you're getting food. Like, no, this should not be on you. This should not be a secret that you have to keep. You did nothing wrong. Story 7. Guess I will take this secret to cremation grounds that I used to overwrite my low marks on school test papers just to get away from my parents' scolding. I know it's a very lame secret, but back then I was a kid who was very conscious of her image as a studious, hardworking student. Imagine getting a 51 out of 80 in a math test. I would have been in great trouble. I also felt really bad for lying to my parents, so much so that I couldn't sleep at night and cried silently for being such a freaking loser. It motivated me to work harder next time, but the fear of failure and chasing only marks and not knowledge made me severely depressed. Story 8. In 5th grade, my friends at an athletic carnival started chanting, "We will R you." Some kids told on us, and then the next day the teacher put us in a different room and tried to make us rat ourselves out. That didn't work, and they still punished us without reason or info, and we kept getting calls from home, and I helped make us innocent and blamed a 5th grader started it. He didn't. It made us innocent, but they still punished us. After a few days of detention, the teacher let me off, but not my friends, and gave me no compensation. All in all, I know too much about the law for a 7th grader. Story 9. I was diagnosed with a brain tumor. No cancer, just some blood vessels that formed funny. My parents think that I'd have one headache, then pass out. I was having these massive, painful headaches every 45 minutes or so and had 3 to 4 before finally passing out. I never told them how many I was having because I didn't want them to worry. And the time I hopped on my biofather's computer and my name was in the search bar of an adult site. I was 16 at the time. Story 10. My dad got deported from Mexico during a college spring break and was formally told to never come back. My mom and I asked him for years what he did. He never answered us. He passed away. He also filled out my absentee ballot while I was abroad, so I genuinely don't know and can't ask if I voted for Trump or Biden. It had been a handy clemency card in many situations. Okay, so yeah, I guess your dad took those secrets to his grave, which, sorry for your loss, but also he filled out your absentee ballot for you and you don't know who he voted for you and stuff? Like, I know it's just one vote, but that feels... I would be very upset about that personally, so I don't know. Please leave your story in the comments. I would love to make a video on them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.